My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 74 years old, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I was once an elementary school teacher who believed that family was the safest place in the world. But on Thanksgiving Day, when I brought a warm pumpkin pie and an old family journal to my son's house, I was stopped right at the door. My daughter-in-law, Victoria, told me coldly that I wasn't welcome at the dinner table unless I apologized. Just behind her, my only son David, the very man I once saved during the crash of 2008, kept his eyes down and said nothing. In that moment, I realized I was no longer seen as a mother or a grandmother. To them, I was just a name tied to the bank accounts they wanted to control. They thought I would beg, but instead, that same night, while they toasted inside, I quietly closed every account with my name on it and theirs, moving everything into a brand new trust set aside only for my granddaughter, the one person brave enough to stand by me. And when my phone lit up later with 25 missed calls, I knew they finally understood what they had lost. Before we continue, make sure you hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because what I did next, you won't believe. Thanksgiving afternoon in Charleston was heavy with clouds, the wind off the Ashley River cutting sharp and cold. I carried a still warm pumpkin pie in my arms, the recipe passed down from my mother. In my other hand, I clutched a worn leather-bound family journal, its pages yellowed with age. My plan was to give it to David that evening, a way of passing 3 generations of memory into his hands. The smell of roasted turkey drifted from the kitchen inside, and for a brief moment, my heart lifted. I told myself, maybe everything will be all right. Maybe we are still a family. But when the door swung open, I wasn't met with a smile. I was met with Victoria's cold eyes. She stood squarely in the doorway, arms folded across her expensive sweater, her posture as rigid as her voice. "You will not sit at this table tonight. Not until you apologize for snooping through our private papers." The words hit like ice water. My fingers tightened on the pie tin until the foil crinkled. "Apologize," I repeated, my voice rasping. Behind her, I saw David arranging the silverware at the long table. My son, but he never looked up, never spoke, never reached for me. "But David," I called softly, hoping he might lift his head, just once, so I could see the boy who used to sit at the kitchen table, crying over math homework. But he only gave a slight shrug, his eyes fixed on a spoon, as if it were the most urgent task in the world. His silence hurt more than any accusation. Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice, each word sharp enough to cut. "This night is for celebration. We won't let you ruin it." I glanced past her into the house. The dining room glowed with candles, crystal glasses waiting to be filled, steaming dishes spread across the table. A picture of warmth, of family, yet not a place for me. The very glow of it felt like a gilded cage, shutting me out in the cold. I drew a slow breath and set the pumpkin pie gently on the small porch table. The crust was golden, still radiating heat, almost mocking in its perfection. Beside it, I laid down the old family journal. The thud of leather on wood echoed like a full stop on decades of love. Memories flooded me. I saw David on that night, back in 2008, knocking on my doors with a pale face and trembling hands, begging me to save his house after the crash had wrecked his business. I hadn't hesitated. I signed the joint account papers because I thought it was love. I thought it was trust. But tonight I understood it had been chains. Laughter rolled from inside, mixed with the rich smell of turkey, striking me like a slap. Victoria smirked when she saw me step back. Behind her, David stayed silent. He had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. I turned and walked down the porch steps. The river wind whipped at my face, and tears blurred my eyes, but I refused to collapse. Each step cut deeper into me, but within the pain, a single thought blazed: if family is measured only in bank balances, then I will show them what true loss feels like. The door shut behind me with a hard click, sealing the betrayal. I didn't look back. I had left the pie and the journal symbols of love rejected. What I carried with me instead was a new resolve, cold and sharp as steel. That night, sitting behind the wheel of my car, watching the glow of their riverfront home fade into the distance, I knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a war they never saw coming. The drive back to my small house was silent, except for the hum of tires on wet pavement. Charleston's streets glistened from an afternoon drizzle, the lamplight stretching across puddles like fractured glass. My hands trembled on the wheel, not from the cold, but from the weight pressing down on my chest. Betrayal doesn't roar like thunder. It seeps in quietly, like water finding every crack. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the tears had dried into salt on my cheeks. I carried the emptiness inside with me, hanging my scarf on the hook and setting my keys on the kitchen counter. The house felt colder than usual, every wall echoing with a reminder I wasn't welcome at my own son's table. I lowered myself into the armchair in the living room, staring at the family photographs lining the mantel. There was David in his high school baseball uniform, grinning with a chipped tooth. There was his wedding photo with Victoria, all smiles under the magnolia trees. And there was Emily Gnome, Claire still a little girl with pigtails, holding my hand on her first day of school. Looking at those frames now, I wondered when the warmth of those moments had soured. My mind pulled me back, unbidden, to 2008. The memory was so vivid, I could almost smell the faint scent of chalk dust clinging to my clothes, the remnants of decades teaching children to read and write. That night, I had been grading papers when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, David stood there, pale and shaken. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he whispered, his voice breaking. His hands shook as he gripped the door frame. "The bank is closing in. If I lose the house, Victoria will never forgive me. The kids will have nothing." I remember his face as clearly as I remember my own reflection. The desperation in his eyes sliced through me. He was my only child, the boy I had stayed up with when fevers raged, the boy I had walked to school through rainstorms. Seeing him broken like that left me no choice. I invited him in, sat him down, and listened as he poured out the mess. His small business had collapsed with the economy. Debts stacked higher than he could pay. The bank threatened foreclosure. His pride had cracked, and all that was left was a son begging for rescue. My retirement savings had taken me decades to build. Every dollar came from long days on my feet, nights spent grading until my fingers cramped, summers spent tutoring instead of resting. It wasn't much, but it was steady, secure. I had planned to use it to keep myself afloat in old age. But when David clasped my hand and begged, none of that mattered. We sat together in the bank's glass-walled office the next morning, the sterile smell of paperwork filling the air. The banker slid a stack of forms across the desk, his smile polite but practiced. "The best option," he explained, "is to open joint accounts. That way your son can help manage funds if anything happens to you." I remember the weight of the pen in my hand. My pulse raced as I hovered over the dotted line. Some small voice whispered, "Are you sure?" But louder still was David's voice beside me. "Kim." "Thank you, Mom. You're saving us," he said, tears pooling in his eyes. So I signed. Each signature felt like a vow of trust. Each initial, a sacrifice. I told myself it was love. That was family. That was what mothers did. When the banker stamped the forms with a loud thud, I felt a strange chill even as I forced a smile. I ignored the warning in his words. "Just to be clear, Mrs. Hayes, joint account holders both have full authority. Either of you can withdraw funds at any time." I nodded as if I understood. But truthfully, I pushed the warning aside. I thought, he's my son. He'll protect me. He'll never use that power against me. We walked out into the sunshine that day, and David squeezed my hand. "You won't regret this," he said softly. "We're family. We look out for each other." I carried those words with me for years. I repeated them whenever doubt crept in. They became my shield against suspicion, my lullaby when fear whispered in the dark. But sitting alone in my living room now, staring at the pieless counter and the silence of Thanksgiving night, those words cut differently. We look out for each other. What a cruel joke. The truth was sharper than any knife. That day in the bank, I hadn't just signed papers. I had unknowingly handed over my independence. I had unlocked a door they would one day slam in my face. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, pulling me back to the present. I poured myself tea, but the steam rising from the cup only fogged the edges of the truth. My son, my own flesh and blood, had turned that act of love into a weapon. And Victoria, oh, she wielded it with a smile as sharp as glass. I stared down into the amber liquid and whispered, "So this is what trust means to them." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. That night I couldn't sleep. I wandered from room to room, touching the edges of framed photos, the knickknacks collected through years of birthdays and Christmases. Every memory was tainted now, colored by betrayal. But beneath the ache, beneath the grief, something else began to stir, a steel I thought had long since rusted. Because if trust had been twisted into chains, then perhaps I still had the power to break them. That night, the house felt like a hollow shell. The ticking of the old wall clock echoed through the rooms, louder than it had any right to be. I sat in the living room with a cooling cup of tea, my hands wrapped around it for comfort that never came. The silence was suffocating, pressing against me harder than the November wind outside. I tried to eat a small bowl of lentil soup I had made that morning, but each spoonful turned to sand in my mouth. Every bite reminded me of the feast across town, the glow of candles and laughter that I had been denied. My son's voice, silent at the door, echoed louder than any mocking word. Betrayal has a way of looping in your mind, each replay cutting deeper than the last. I pushed the bowl away and wandered into my study. The drawer was heavy, but I pulled it open and spread the contents across my desk: account statements, trust deeds, insurance policies, the very papers Victoria accused me of snooping through. My fingers traced the lines of ink, my name written beside David's, bound together by signatures that were supposed to mean safety. Instead, they had become shackles. The banker's words from years ago rang in my ears. This time, like a siren, I'd ignored. "Either party can withdraw at any time," I whispered into the empty room. How could I have been so blind? My voice cracked, but behind it, something sharp took root. Not despair, resolve. Just then, a knock rattled through the stillness. I froze, my heart lurching. It wasn't the angry pounding of neighbors, nor the officious rap of a stranger. It was soft, hesitant. I drew back the curtain and gasped. On my porch stood Claire. Her coat was too thin for the night air, her hair loose and windswept. She clutched a folder tight against her chest, as though it weighed more than her small frame could bear. When I opened the door, she slipped inside quickly, her breath coming fast. "Grandma," she whispered, eyes darting as if afraid of being followed. I had to come. I can't stay quiet anymore. I led her into the kitchen, poured her a mug of tea, and waited as she placed the folder on the table. Her hand shook as she slid it toward me. "I saw Mom's laptop," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I shouldn't have looked, but, Grandma, they're planning to drain everything. All of it. Next week." The words landed like a hammer. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fingers fumbled as I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, the ink still fresh. I read line after line, the casual cruelty of Victoria's words to David, written in cold black and white. "We need to move fast before she notices. Once the transfer is complete, we'll have enough for the property. Don't let her near the accounts again. She still thinks she has control." Another email from a lawyer. "Papers will be finalized Monday. It's airtight." The blood rushed in my ears, my chest tightening, but not from weakness. Fury surged, hot and raw. They weren't just planning to spend my money. They were plotting to erase me completely. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears. Grandma, I couldn't just sit there. They talk about your money like it's already theirs, like you don't matter. I reached across the table, steadying her trembling hands. My voice was low but fierce. You did the right thing. You're the only one who sees me as more than a burden. She bit her lip, trying not to cry. They'll hate me if they find out. No, child, I said firmly. They'll have to face themselves. What you did took courage, and it gave me what I needed: proof. I spread the pages across the table, each one like ammunition. The more I read, the more the fog of grief burned away, replaced by clarity. Every smug email, every arrogant plan, they were the weapons I would use against them. For the first time since standing on that porch, I felt my spine straighten. The silence of the house no longer pressed me down. It steadied me. Claire leaned closer, her voice soft but urgent. What are you going to do, Grandma? I looked her in the eye, my words deliberate. They think I'm blind, but I've kept records longer than they've been married. I know where the accounts are, how they're linked, and every signature required. They've underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. Her lips parted, hope flickering in her eyes. You mean, you're going to stop them? Yes, I said firmly, not just for the money, for the respect they stripped away from me, for the love they tried to twist into chains. I rose from the table and pulled out the old leather-bound planner where I'd kept notes for decades. Inside were account numbers, banker contacts, and reminders I hadn't touched in years. I set it down beside the damning emails, the two sets of papers merging into one undeniable truth. Claire watched me, her face pale but determined. I knew you wouldn't give up, she whispered. I cupped her cheek gently, and I knew you'd find your voice, just when I needed it most. Her tears fell then, but they weren't of fear, they were of release. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, I sat with my granddaughter beside me, not as a woman broken, but as a woman reborn. The chains of trust had been twisted into weapons, yes, but now I had the chance to cut them. And I swore, as I sorted through the papers, that when Monday came, the accounts they thought they owned would vanish beneath their feet. Morning broke gray and brittle over Charleston. The sky was heavy with low clouds, and the air smelled faintly of salt and wet leaves. I hadn't slept much, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. The folder of documents sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon, and beside it, Claire had fallen asleep in a chair, her head resting on her folded arms. For a moment, I simply watched her breathe. My granddaughter, the only one who had dared to stand by me. She had risked her parents' wrath to bring me the truth, and that truth was the spark I needed. Quietly, I draped a blanket over her shoulders and whispered, "You gave me back my voice, child." By the time the sun was struggling above the horizon, I was dressed and ready. I wore my best coat, the one I used to wear to school board meetings, a reminder that I was once a woman who commanded respect. Claire woke, rubbing her eyes, and when she saw me holding the folder, she sat up straighter. "Are you really going to do it today?" she asked, her voice hushed but steady. "Yes," I answered, "today, before they make their move." We drove together through streets, still quiet from the holiday. Families would be crowding malls for Black Friday sales, chasing discounts, but I was chasing something else: freedom. My heart pounded with every mile, a drumbeat of both fear and determination. The bank loomed ahead, glass and steel reflecting the gray morning sky. Wells Fargo, the place where I had once signed away my safety, now waited to return it. As we pushed through the revolving doors, the scent of polished wood and coffee drifted in the air. People sat waiting with shopping bags at their feet, their chatter light and careless. I held the folder tight against my chest. A lifeline. A young woman at the reception desk smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today?" "I need to see a senior banker," I said firmly. "This morning, if possible." She clicked through her screen and nodded. "Of course, someone will be right with you." Please, take a seat. Claire and I settled into chairs near the window. My hands trembled slightly on the folder, but I refused to let her see it as weakness. Instead, I reached over and squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, I whispered, you remember this complicated is better than helpless. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. Minutes later, a man in a navy suit appeared. Mrs. Hayes, I'm Daniel, one of the senior bankers. Please, come with me. We followed him into a small office with glass walls. The desk was immaculate, a computer screen glowing softly, a pen lined up perfectly with a notepad. I sat, placed my folder on the table, and met his eyes squarely. I'm here to close every joint account that bears my name alongside David Hayes, I said, my voice steady. And I want all of my funds transferred into a new trust account with one sole beneficiary, my granddaughter, Claire Hayes. Daniel blinked, his professional calm only flickering for a second. Then he leaned forward. All right, Mrs. Hayes, may I see your documents? I opened the folder, like evidence in a courtroom. Bank statements, trust deeds, identification. Claire's wide eyes followed every movement, the weight of what we were doing sinking in. Daniel scanned the papers, nodding slowly. You're correct. Joint accounts give both parties full authority to separate. They must be closed entirely, and the funds reallocated. Since you are here first, we can process your portion immediately. The relief that washed over me was sharp, almost painful. For years, those papers had felt like chains. Now, they were keys. And the trust account, I asked. We can establish a revocable, living trust in your name today, Daniel explained. With Claire Hayes as the sole beneficiary, no substitutions, no co-trustees unless you request them. We can also add maximum security measures alerts, transaction limits, anything you need. I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, maximum protections. While I'm alive, no one but me touches it. Claire squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes shining with both fear and pride. Daniel printed the forms, sliding them across the desk one by one. I read each line carefully, my pen gliding over the dotted lines. This time, I wasn't trembling with doubt. This time, I was signing not out of blind trust, but deliberate choice. With every signature, I felt chains snapping loose. When the last page was signed, Daniel gathered the stack neatly. All right, Mrs. Hayes, the joint accounts are officially in the process of closure. Your funds will be transferred to the new trust by the end of the day. Claire Hayes is now listed as the sole beneficiary. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the words settle over me like sunlight after a storm. Victory didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. I rose from my chair, smoothing the folder against my chest. Thank you, Daniel. Today you helped me breathe freely again. He gave a small, respectful nod. Not everyone has the courage to make decisions like this. You should be proud. As Claire and I walked back through the lobby, the buzz of shoppers filled the air once more. Yet for me, the world had shifted. I wasn't leaving as someone's dependent, someone's burden. I was leaving as a woman who had reclaimed her power. Outside, the cold morning air hit my cheeks, but it felt bracing now, not cruel. Claire slipped her arm through mine. Grandma, she whispered, I'm proud of you. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud of myself too. And though my phone began to buzz with the first of what would become dozens of missed calls, I didn't reach for it. Let them call. Let them panic. The trap they had built was already collapsing, and by the time they realized it, it would be far too late. While Claire and I were sitting in that glass-walled office, reclaiming my future, across town, a different world was unfolding. At the Charleston outlets, the parking lots were overflowing with cars, shoppers dragging bags stuffed with bargains, the smell of pretzels and roasted almonds filling the air. And there they were, David and Victoria, dressed like influencers, rather than parents with responsibilities. David strode through the plaza with shopping bags hanging from both arms, his expensive watch flashing under the winter sun. Victoria kept her phone raised, recording every purchase for her followers, narrating as if the world should envy her. "Say hi, babe," she laughed, angling the camera toward him. David adjusted his sunglasses, grinning wide. This is how Black Friday should be done. Victoria squealed, flipping the screen back to herself. Gucci finally dropped that limited tote. Of course we had to get it. She lifted the bag like a trophy before slipping into another boutique. At the Rolex counter, David tried on watch after watch, each one more extravagant than the last. The clerk bowed with rehearsed politeness, murmuring about his excellent taste. Finally, David settled on a gleaming timepiece with a price tag large enough to cover a month of my groceries. Victoria clapped her hands in delight. "Perfect. It suits you. You deserve it." He puffed his chest, basking in her approval. "Why not? We'll have access to more soon anyway. Mom can't stop us this time." Victoria's smile sharpened as she leaned closer, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Exactly. Once the transfers go through, it's all ours. She won't even notice until it's too late." Her phone dinged with a new notification. She instantly uploaded their video, captioning it, #couple, goals, #Black Friday, done right. Comments poured in, praising their luxury lifestyle. She beamed as if validation on a screen could erase the ugliness of her schemes. Later, they sat outside a cafe, shopping bags piled at their feet like spoils of war. Foam-topped lattes arrived, cinnamon dusted on top. David scrolled through comments, chuckling. "Everyone's jealous," he said smugly. "Let them be," Victoria replied, sipping delicately, her lipstick marking the rim of the cup. "We earned this, and you know what? I don't even feel guilty about your mom anymore. She had her time. Now it's our turn." David leaned back, stretching his legs, his grin lazy. "She won't even realize what's missing until it's gone. And even if she does, what can she do? Joint accounts are binding. She signed them. That's the beauty of it." Victoria laughed, sharp and cruel. "And you thought she might fight back? Please, she's too old, too soft. The woman still writes checks at the grocery store." They toasted with their cups like victors at the end of a battle already won. Around them, shoppers bustled, arms heavy with bags, eyes bright with the thrill of bargains. To strangers passing by, David and Victoria looked like just another couple indulging in holiday excess. But to me, if I had been there watching, it would have been unbearable, because every sip of their coffee, every swipe of their cards, was rooted in stolen confidence. And that confidence was about to collapse. When the server returned with their bill, David slipped his new Rolex onto his wrist and handed over his card with a flourish. He leaned back, confident. Already glancing toward the next boutique, the server swiped once. The machine beeped, declined. David frowned. "Try again," he said, his tone firm, dismissive. "Bess." The server swiped again, declined. Victoria's smile faltered, but she quickly waved it off. "Use mine." She handed over her card with manicured fingers, her eyes darting nervously toward the shoppers waiting behind them. The server swiped, declined. Murmurs rippled through the line. Shoppers shifted, whispering. A flush of red crept up Victoria's neck, spreading to her cheeks. "That's impossible. We just used them this morning." David snatched his card back, fumbling with his phone. He tapped furiously, pulling up the banking app. His jaw tightened. What the hell? His voice trailed off as his screen refreshed. His balance was no longer theirs to flaunt. Victoria leaned over, eyes widening in panic. "No, no, 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 this isn't happening." He tried dialing my number, his hands shaking, his voice muttering curses. The call failed. He tried again, failed. Shoppers behind them were openly watching now, some snickering, others whispering. Victoria's fury cracked through her panic. Call her again. Call your mother right now. She's not answering. David snapped, his voice breaking. His chest heaved with the dawning realization. She did something. She shut us out. Victoria slammed her purse closed, her eyes wild. Unbelievable. After everything, she thinks she can just erase us. But her words didn't carry conviction, they carried fear. Because in that moment, for the first time, they realized the truth. They had underestimated me. The woman they dismissed as weak, too soft, too naive wasn't powerless. She was fighting back. And their empire of entitlement, built on arrogance and greed, was already beginning to crumble. The pounding on my front door came just after sunset. Sharp, angry thuds rattled the glass panes, shaking through the quiet of my living room. I had been expecting it, but still, my heart gave one heavy thump. I set my teacup down, straightened my shoulders, and walked slowly to the door. Through the peephole, I saw them, David and Victoria, faces tight with rage, illuminated by the porch light. Their shopping bags were gone, replaced with clenched fists and furious eyes. "Open this door, Mom," David barked, his voice cracking. I unlocked it deliberately, letting the chain dangle a moment before sliding it free. When I opened the door, their fury spilled in with the cold night air. Victoria stormed past me first, her heels stabbing into the hardwood floor. "You destroyed everything," she spat. "You had no right." David followed close behind, his voice lower, but trembling with fury. "What did you do, Mom? You closed the accounts, didn't you?" I shut the door calmly and faced them. My voice was steady. "You want to talk about rights when I signed your names onto those accounts. That wasn't a right. That was trust, and you buried it yourselves." Victoria's mouth twisted. "Don't lecture us. You can't just erase us from what's ours." I moved to the sideboard, opened a drawer, and pulled out the folder I had prepared. I laid it carefully on the dining table. The papers inside, neat and final. Copies of trust documents, account closures, beneficiary designations, all stamped, signed, notarized, evidence that couldn't be twisted. "Sit," I said simply. They hesitated, but obeyed. David dropped heavily into a chair, his knee bouncing with restless energy. Victoria crossed her arms, her nails tapping against the table like claws. I slid the first page forward. "Wells Fargo, November 29th. Joint accounts closed. Funds transferred to the Margaret Hayes Living Trust." Another page, beneficiary Claire Hayes, Seoul. David slammed his palm on the table. "Claire," his voice cracked, almost breaking. "You cut your own son out and gave it all to a child." "She's not just a child," I said firmly. "She's the only one who told me the truth. The only one who came to me not asking for money, but begging me to protect myself. That's the difference." Victoria leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "So this is punishment? You think you can humiliate us like this?" I cut her off, my tone sharp but calm. "Humiliation? No. Accountability. Do you want me to list it? The dinners where you laughed behind my back, the papers you slid under my nose, hoping I wouldn't read the fine print, the arrogance of assuming I'd never fight back." David's shoulders slumped, his desperation plain. "Mom, you don't understand. We built our lives around this. We need that money." "Then maybe you should have built your lives on your own work," I answered, "not mine." Silence stretched between us. The old clock on the mantel ticked loudly, each second widening the gulf. Victoria finally broke it, her voice low but venomous. "This isn't over. Trusts can be challenged. We'll fight this in court." Without a word, I slid another page across the table. My lawyer's notarization glared back at her in ink and seal. "Already consulted. Irrevocable. Every loophole closed. You can try, but the law is on my side now." Her face paled. She scanned the stamps, the signatures, her breath catching. She turned to David for rescue, but he pressed his hands into his hair. staring down in defeat. I leaned back, folding my hands neatly. I was naive once. I believed adding your names meant safety. But last night, I remembered something. Safety doesn't come from trust in the wrong people. It comes from protecting yourself. And you taught me that, even if you didn't mean to. Victoria shot to her feet, her chair scraping back. This isn't finished. You'll regret this. I rose too, my height diminished by age but my resolve towering. No, what you regret is that the chain you wrapped around me has snapped, and you don't get to tighten it again. David walked more slowly, his shoulders sagging. He looked at me one last time, his voice breaking. So that's it. You're cutting us off for good. I didn't hesitate. No, David, you cut yourself off. The day you decided my worth was measured in dollars, not in love. That was the day you walked away from me. I only made it official. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Just then, the door creaked open again. Claire stepped inside, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes blazing with determination. She clutched a folder to her chest and walked straight to the table. "Grandma," she said firmly, ignoring the stunned faces of her parents, "I need to show you something." She opened the folder and laid out fresh printed emails across the same table where moments earlier David and Victoria had tried to bluster. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "They weren't just after the accounts," she said, her eyes locked on me. "They were planning to sell everything, even your house, while you're still alive, and they were already talking to a realtor." The room went silent, my breath caught, the betrayal cutting deeper than before. David's face drained of color. Victoria sputtered, "You went through our computer. How dare you?" But Claire cut her off, her voice like steel. "How dare you plan to erase your own mother? How dare you treat her like nothing but a bank account? I won't cover for you anymore." For the first time, it wasn't me standing against them. It was their daughter. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the old clock, steady and merciless. Claire's words still hung in the air, heavy as stone. My son sat frozen, his eyes darting between me and the damning papers. Victoria's face went pale, then flushed red, then pale again. Finally, Victoria broke. She slammed her hand on the table, her voice rising to a shriek. "You don't understand. You don't know what it was like for me. Growing up with nothing. I had holes in my shoes. I lied about vacations I never had. Do you know what that does to a child? Do you know what it does to a woman?" She was pacing now, her arms flailing as her words tumbled out. "Every time I walked into a store, I felt smaller than everyone else. Every birthday party I skipped because we couldn't afford a gift. Every humiliation I swore I'd never feel that way again. And now, every purchase, every brand, it proves I'm not that girl anymore. It proves I matter." Her confession was raw, her voice breaking, but it wasn't remorse. It was rage. Rage at the world. Rage at me. David finally spoke, his voice quieter, but no less pained. He didn't pace. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, head bowed. "You think she's the only one who knows humiliation." His voice cracked. 2008 destroyed me. Mom, you remember, my business gone, the house slipping away. I lost everything I worked for. And every time I saw you steady, safe, untouched, it burned. You had what I didn't, and I hated it. Victoria spun toward him, seizing on his words. "Exactly. She sat on her savings while we bled. She could have made it easier, but she chose not to. She protected herself while we suffered. Don't you dare judge us now for taking what should have been ours." Their voices collided, a storm of confession and accusation. The room vibrated with it, the rawness of their bitterness filling every corner. For a moment, I just let it wash over me. And then, I stood. Enough. The single word froze them. They stared at me, panting, eyes wide, waiting for me to crumble, to bend, to excuse them, but I didn't. I looked first at Victoria. I know shame, I said, my voice steady, firm. I was the one patching shoes, stretching every dollar, making dinners out of scraps. You weren't the only child of poverty. Victoria, I was the mother of it. But suffering doesn't give you the right to wound others. Pain may explain choices, but it doesn't excuse cruelty. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I turned to David. Yes, 2008 was cruel. I remember the night you came to me broken. I wanted to help you, and I did, but I couldn't hand you resilience like a check. You had to rebuild it yourself. And instead of rebuilding, you chose to tear me down. But failure doesn't grant you the right to betray. Struggle is not a free pass to steal. His face crumpled, his eyes closing against the weight of my words. I took a breath, my chest tight, but my voice unshaken. We all suffer. We all stumble. But suffering is not a weapon. Betrayal doesn't turn into loyalty just because it was born from pain. What you two did wasn't born from love. It was born from greed. The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Claire stepped forward, her voice calm but unwavering. Mom, Dad, you always told me we were a family. But what you've done doesn't look like family. Grandma's right. Struggle doesn't justify cruelty. And I won't stand by it anymore. Her words landed like a final nail. David's shoulders slumped, his face folding in on itself, as if her truth pierced deeper than mine ever could. Victoria's lips trembled, but the fury had drained from her eyes. All that remained was the hollow shell of arrogance, stripped bare. I looked at them both, my voice soft but cutting. Pain is not an excuse for betrayal, and I will not let my life's work be the casualty of yours. The clock ticked in the stillness, each second a reminder of the distance between us now. Victoria sank into a chair, her sobs breaking through at last, her hands clutching her face. David pressed a hand to his eyes, but no tears came, only silence. I felt no triumph, no gloating, only a solemn strength. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their burdens. They were carrying the weight of their own choices. Claire came to my side, slipping her hand into mine. Her grip was steady, her eyes fierce. For years, I had been the one protecting her. Tonight, she had stood with me, unflinching, against her own parents. The battle in that room was over. Not with shouts, not with fists, but with truth, truth that cut sharper than any knife. And in the silence that followed, I knew their greed had broken us, but it had also freed me. The moving truck pulled away, leaving behind a small gray cottage perched near the water's edge in Charleston. It wasn't extravagant, but the porch faced the sea, and the salty air wrapped around me like a promise of freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't surrounded by walls heavy with betrayal. I was surrounded by waves, by gulls, by open skabgi stobiki dimitki. Claire carried a box in beside me, her laugh light, as she teased me for bringing too many quilts. We unpacked slowly, carefully, filling the little house with only what mattered. No heavy portraits, no shadows of old arguments, just warmth, just safety, just us. That evening, we shared fish and chips from a diner down the street, sitting on the porch as the sky turned pink over the water. My phone buzzed with another call from David. I turned it face down without answering. Claire glanced at me, and I simply said, "Peace is worth more than apologies spoken too late." She nodded, her hand finding mine. Later, under the lamplight of my new bedroom, I wrote Claire a letter, not about money or accounts or trusts, but about dignity, about never mistaking someone's silence for weakness, about the truth that pain can explain behavior, but never excuse betrayal. I sealed it with her name, a legacy worth more than any inheritance. As the tide rolled in and the stars broke through the mist, I rocked gently on the porch, wrapped in a blanket Claire had tucked around me. For once, I didn't feel abandoned or betrayed. I felt whole, because they had taken years of my trust, but they had not taken the core of who I was. And that was the victory I would carry into every dawn that followed. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced betrayal within your own family? And if so, how did you find the strength to rise above it? Your voice matters, and your story could be the next one that helps someone else feel less alone.